The coward clings to life and becomes its slave. The suicidal man despises life and becomes death's servant. But the Christian hero loves life so rightly, so thoroughly, that he can risk death without worshiping it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why Christianity is not beige. Christianity is not room temperature oatmeal for people who think black pepper is far too spicy. It is not the religion of people who put live, laugh, love over the toilet and call it theology. It is not lukewarm soup served in a Methodist basement by a committee that needs 3 meetings to approve the napkins that year. Christianity is far stranger than that, wilder than that, holier than that. It is love and wrath, both burning. It is joy, but it is joy with a sword. It is meekness, but meekness with a spine. It is a lamb lying down beside a lion, and the lion has not been neutered by the Church Growth Committee. Welcome to the Midweek Refuel, where we seek out the ancient wisdom simply because modern wisdom looked at the ruins of the family, the collapse of courage, the confusion of the children, and the loneliness of men and said, good news, folks, we're almost there. We are continuing through G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy, and we are in chapter 6, The Paradoxes of Christianity. And if you'll remember, last week, Chesterton noticed that Christianity was being accused of opposite crimes at the exact same time. It was too gloomy, too cheerful, too meek, too violent, too plain, too ornate. And that raised a possibility. Maybe Christianity is not the odd shape. Maybe Christianity is the right shape. But now Chesterton takes the next step. Christianity is not merely the right shape. Christianity is the right tension. Because if Christianity is the right shape, what kind of shape is it? Is it just average? Is Christianity just the safe middle ground? Is Christianity, is Christian virtue just lukewarm compromise between two errors? Is the Christian life basically spiritual oatmeal? Not too hot, not too cold, not too flavorful, not too offensive, just a nice bowl of religious beige for people who alphabetize their socks and think mild salsa is a spiritual gift. Chesterton says no. Chesterton is not the boring middle between two extremes. Christianity is something much stranger than that. Christianity keeps opposite holy passions alive at the same time. It does not dilute them. It does not average them out. It does not take love and wrath, put them in a blender, and pour out something called being nice. And Lord, deliver us, please, from being nice. Nice is what happens when love loses its teeth and truth loses its pants. And we have watched the whole world sell its soul to niceness. Worse, we have watched much of the church do it. People no longer ask, is this true? They no longer ask, is this holy? They no longer ask, is this person leading souls towards Christ or away from him? They just say, but they're so nice. A man can deny the faith, bless what God condemns, confuse the children, preach another gospel, sell spiritual poison by the gallon, and modern man will look up from his desert and say, well, he was very pleasant at dinner. As if pleasantness were holiness. As if manners were orthodoxy. As if the devil could not learn to pass the rolls and say please. There are people who are nice all the way to hell. And there are people who will smile while leading others there. So no, Nice is not enough. Nice is not the test of truth. Nice is not the test of holiness. Nice is not the test of faithfulness. The fruit of the Spirit is not niceness. Look it up. The fruit of the Spirit is love, and love tells the truth. Nice is not a fruit of the Spirit. You can check it. Love is, joy is, peace is, patience is, kindness is, goodness is, faithfulness is, gentleness is, self-control is. But nice is often just cowardice with better table manners. Christianity does not water love into sentiment. It does not twist wrath into cruelty. It does not reduce courage to recklessness. It does not confuse humility with self-hatred. It keeps each passion gloriously alive and dangerous and obedient to God. It lets joy shout. It lets grief weep. It lets righteous anger burn. It lets mercy run barefoot down the road to embrace the prodigal son. But it keeps each passion in its proper place under God. That is the move that Chesterton is making here. He says, I went back over all the accusations and the key kept fitting the lock. Swinburne, the brilliant English poet and professional Christian irritant, was angry that Christians were unhappy. And then he was angry that Christians were happy. Well, Chesterton says maybe the disease is not Christianity, maybe the disease is Swinburne. The restraints of Christianity bothered him because he was too much of a hedonist. The faith of Christianity bothered him because he was too much of a pessimist. Christianity was not contradicting itself. Christianity was contradicting him and the idols he had mistaken for his own sanity. And this is why some arguments go nowhere. They're a waste of your time and of my time. Sometimes you are not arguing with a conclusion. Sometimes you are arguing with a foundation. Sometimes the person across from you does not have reasons. They have slogans. And sometimes he does have reasons, but they are built on a very different altar. He is as committed to autonomy, pleasure, progress, resentment, or self-invention as the Christian is supposed to be committed to Christ. So you can answer his objection perfectly and still not move him an inch, because the objection was never the foundation. It was the smoke coming out of the chimney. The fire is somewhere down deeper. And you can hear this confusion everywhere around us now. There are people who will say, I just do not believe Christianity is true, but I would rather live in a Christian civilization. Of course you would. That is like standing under a roof and saying, I do not believe in architecture, but I do enjoy not being rained on. They want the fruit. They are not convinced of the root. They want the mercy, they want the dignity, they want the family, the moral order, the restraint, the courage, the protection of children, the honoring of women, the taming of violent men, and the care for the weak. They just do not want the Christ who made those things possible. But Chesterton would say to you, look closer, friend. If the fruit keeps coming from this tree, perhaps the tree is not an accident. If Christian civilization produces goods that secularism cannot explain and cannot sustain, well, then maybe, just maybe, I'm spitballing here, maybe Christianity is not merely useful. Maybe Christianity is true. Because when someone says Christianity is oppressive, the first thing to ask is, which idol is Christianity refusing to worship today? If a man worships pleasure, well, Christian restraint feels like hatred to him. If a man worships autonomy, well, Christian obedience feels like slavery to him. If a man worships safety, Christian courage feels like madness to him. If a man worships niceness, oh, God help him, Christian holiness feels like violence to him. If a man worships self-expression, then Christian repentance feels like death to him. And to be fair, repentance is death. That is rather the point. The old man does not need a spa day. He does not need a podcast. He does not need a life coach named Brayton who drinks mushroom coffee and says alignment every 4 minutes. The old man needs crucifixion. Modern wisdom keeps trying to rehabilitate Adam. Christianity says no. He needs to die in Jesus Christ and be raised anew. You cannot therapize Adam into holiness. You cannot essential oil Cain into brotherly love. You cannot put a weighted blanket on sin and call it healing. The flesh does not need a better morning routine. The flesh needs a cross. And that brings us to something I have thought for a very long time. Christianity is truly open to everyone, but not everyone is cut out for Christianity. Now, I have to say that very carefully. I do not mean Christianity is a private club for the naturally religious, those born with a spiritual spoon in their mouth, the emotionally stable, the morally polished, or the people who already know when to stand and sit and how to pronounce Habakkuk without sounding like they're choking on a Lego. The gospel is open to everyone. Whosoever will may come. The drunk may come. The addict may come. The coward may come. The proud may come. The broken may come. The bitter may come. The soft man may come. The angry man may come. The woman with a past may come. The man with a secret may come. The child with confusion may come. The old sinner with miles on him may come. Christ turns none away who come to him. But, and here is where modern sentimental religion starts coughing into its scarf. Christianity does not say, come as you are and stay as you are. That is not the gospel of my King. That is a hostage negotiation with your sin, and it doesn't work. Christianity says, come as you are and die. Come and be forgiven. Come and be washed. Come and be remade. Come and lay down your idols. Come and stop calling your chains your personality. Come and stop calling your wounds your identity. Come and stop calling your rebellion your authenticity. Come and stop calling your cowardice your trauma response. Come and stop calling your lust your love language. Come and receive a life you could never manufacture on your own. So when I say not everyone is cut out for Christianity, I do not mean some people are excluded. I mean, not everyone is willing to be cut. And the cutting is the point. Circumcision of the heart. The sword of the Spirit. Take up your cross. Lose your life to find it. But the pruning of the vine. The narrow gate. Do you hear how often Scripture speaks this way? Cut, pierce, prune, die, deny yourself, pick up your cross, enter by the narrow gate. Christianity is not vague spiritual encouragement for people who want their old life slightly moisturized. The physician does not pat the tumor and say, you are valid. He removes it. He does not comfort the cancer. He cuts the cancer out. And if we are honest, that is why many people do not want the great physician. They do not want healed. They want affirmed. They do not want delivered. They want understood. They do not want resurrected. They want their grave decorated tastefully. But Christ did not come to redecorate tombs. Christ came to raise the dead. And some people came to Christianity hoping for a mint on the pillow, a vague sense of transcendence, a little community, some emotional support, and maybe at least a decent Christmas Eve candlelight service. But Christianity is not looking for customers. It is making saints. And saints are not merely nice religious people. Saints are people who have survived the surgery of grace. And this is where we have to understand the strange mercy of God. The gospel is offered freely. It is not offered cheaply. The door is open, but the way is narrow. Not because God is stingy, because reality itself is narrow. A man can enter a house through the door, but not through the wall, no matter how sincere he is about drywall. And this is why Christianity has always had that strange power of attraction and offense. They really do, people want what you hold just out of their reach. That is true in 1,000 ways, and it is certainly true here. When the church stops begging the world to like her, the world suddenly remembers she has something it cannot manufacture. When the church stops acting desperate, she becomes dangerous again. When the church stops lowering the cross to make it more accessible, people begin to see that it was never a hobby horse. It was an instrument of death and resurrection. The church does not need to make Christianity impossible to reach. Christ has already come all the way down to us. But the church must never pretend that reaching Christ means avoiding the cross. The mercy is offered, the grace is very real, the invitation is very sincere, but the old life does not get through the narrow gate. No matter how much you may want it to, it has to die at the entrance or it does not enter. So yes, Christianity is open to everyone, but not everyone is willing to be cut by Christianity. The coward is welcome in Christianity, but he cannot keep his cowardice as Lord. The reckless man is welcome in Christianity, but he cannot keep his recklessness as identity. The hedonist is welcome in Christianity, but he cannot keep pleasure on the throne. The pessimist is welcome in Christianity, but he cannot keep despair as his prophet. The proud man is welcome in Christianity, but he must learn to kneel. The despairing man is welcome in Christianity. He must learn to live. The angry man is welcome in Christianity, but his anger must be baptized into righteousness, not left to run around the house with a lighter and a gas can. All are invited, but all must be changed. That is the terrible mercy of the gospel. And this connects directly to Chesterton's point about courage itself. Christianity does not flatter the coward, and it does not flatter the reckless man. It saves them both by cutting them both. It cuts cowardice away from love of life. It cuts despair away from willingness to die. And what remains is courage, Christian courage. A man who loves life like water and can drink death like wine when faithfulness demands it. So Chesterton sees that the critics were partly seeing something real. Christianity does have extremes in it. The saints were very meek. The crusaders were very fierce. The martyrs were strangely joyful in the face of death. The church really did hate suicide with a holy horror and honor martyrdom with a holy reverence. So Christianity is not merely sensible in the worldly way. It is not respectable in the bland suburban way. It is not the religion of people who never say anything louder than, well, bless your heart, while quietly poisoning the casserole. There's something fierce in Christianity. There's something wild in Christianity. There's something that looks almost insane until you realize it is the world that has lost its mind, put a ring light in front of itself and started a channel. And then Chesterton gives us the main distinction. Paganism declared that virtue was in balance. Christianity declared that virtue was in a conflict. Now, he is not saying Aristotle was stupid. Aristotle was not stupid. Aristotle was Aristotle. That is generally a pretty safe sign that a man is not stupid. The Greeks understood the idea of the mean, the middle, the balance. Do not eat too much. Do not eat too little. Do not be rash. Do not be cowardly. Find the reasonable middle. That is not wrong, but Chesterton says Christianity found something stranger, something deeper. Because the deepest virtues are not created by watering down the two extremes. The deepest virtues are created when two powerful truths collide and both remain. Take courage. Courage is not a mild emotion. Courage is a paradox. A courageous man must want to live. It's necessary to be courageous. If he does not want to live, he is not courageous. He's just numb, broken, despairing, or dramatic. And Lord knows we have enough dramatic men already. Some of them need less Nietzsche and a little more lawn work. Less, I am going into the abyss, and a little more, hey, honey, I cleaned the gutters. The abyss can wait. It really can. Your wife asked you 3 weeks ago. But courage also requires a willingness to die. If a man clings to life at all cost, we saw this during the you-know-what. If a man clings to life at all cost, he becomes a coward. If a man throws away life because he does not value it, he becomes suicidal. Christian courage stands between those two pits. But it does not stand there blandly. It stands there blazing like fire. It says, life is good. God made it. I love it. I am grateful for it. I will eat bread. I will drink honey. I will kiss my wife. I will hold my grandchildren. I will watch the sun come up. I will smell the rain. I will laugh with my friends. I will enjoy the good world God made for me. And then it says, but if duty calls, if Christ commands, if truth itself is on the line, if the weak must be defended, if the devil must be resisted, then death does not get the final vote in my decision. That is courage. Not despairing life, not worshiping death, but loving something more than self-preservation. That is why Chesterton says, he that will lose his life, the same shall save it. It is not just a mystical slogan for stained glass saints. It is practical advice for sailors and mountaineers. It could be printed in a drill book. It could be written over a firehouse door. It could be carved above the entrance of the church, or of the church that still remembers that men are supposed to have chests. A man caught by the sea may save his life only by risking it on the cliff. A soldier surrounded by enemies may live only by cutting his way through the danger. A father may save his entire family only by stepping into the danger rather than retreating into comfort. A pastor may save his flock only by telling the truth when lying would be so much easier and so much more likely to get you invited to conferences with soft chairs, expensive coffee, and worship leaders dressed like emotionally complicated substitute teachers. This is why Christianity produces courage. Because Christianity does not say life does not matter, and Christianity does not say life matters more than everything. Christianity says life matters because God gave it, but God matters more than life. And that makes men free. The truth will set you free. This is what our age cannot understand. Our age swings between cowardice and recklessness. On one side, we have safety as the highest good. Be safe. Stay safe, think safe, speak safe, raise safe children, attend safe churches, preach safe sermons, use safe words, do not offend the age, do not risk reputation, do not risk comfort, do not risk being called names by people whose moral courage could be stored in a thimble and still leave room for a myth. But on the other side, we have recklessness dressed up as courage. Burn it down, say anything, fight everyone, destroy yourself, destroy your family, destroy your body, destroy your future. Call it authenticity, call it rebellion, call it masculinity, call it whatever you want. A man can set himself on fire and still not be a lamp. Chesterton would say both are false. The coward loves life wrongly. The reckless man despises life wrongly. The Christian loves life rightly and therefore can risk it rightly. That is the banner of chivalry. And I love that word chivalry. It's a lost word. Chivalry is not weakness, and chivalry is not brutality. Chivalry is strength under vows. It is courage baptized. It is ferocity disciplined by love itself. It is the sword that knows whom it is allowed to strike and whom it is commanded to defend. A Christian man is not called to be harmless in the sense of useless. He is called to be harmless in the sense that his strength is governed by holiness. A butter knife is harmless because it can't do much. A godly man is harmless because he has submitted his strength to Christ and Christ alone. Those are not the same thing. One is dull metal, the other is a sword in a scabbard. And the church desperately needs to remember the difference, because somewhere along the way, too many Christians got the idea that meekness means being the emotional support animal of a collapsing civilization. No. Meekness is not weakness. Meekness is strength submitted to God. Moses was meek. Moses also looked Pharaoh in the face and said, "Let my people go." Christ was meek. Christ also flipped tables and called men whitewashed tombs. Paul was meek. Paul also told false teachers he wished they would go the whole way and emasculate themselves. Yeah, that's in the Bible. Which means apparently the Holy Spirit is less worried about tone policing than some church ladies and half the internet. Christian courage is not performative rage. It is not being a jerk for Jesus. That is not a spiritual gift either. It is not online swagger. It is not a bearded man in sunglasses sitting in his truck recording videos about courage while avoiding every actual responsibility within a 10-mile radius of him. Christian courage is love made brave. It is truth with calluses. It is mercy with a backbone. It is a man who loves life, loves God more, and loves his neighbor enough to stand between him and the wolves. And here is where this lands for Remnant Church. We are not trying to raise up soft Christians who survive by not mattering. And we are not trying to raise up angry Christians who confuse bitterness with boldness. We are trying to become the kind of people who love life and love it so deeply that we will not let the culture of death disciple our children. We love children, so we oppose the mutilation of children. We love women, so we oppose the erasure of women. We love men, so we oppose the systems that make men soft, bitter, fatherless, porn-sick, passive, and useless. We love sinners, so we oppose sin. We love truth, so we refuse lies. We love the world God made, so we refuse worldliness. We love peace, so we prepare to stand. We love life, so we do not bow down to death. And that is where Chesterton puts the blade in. Christianity is not moderation as compromise. Christianity is holiness as ordered intensity. It is not beige, it is not pink, it is not gray. It is red and white, kept pure. It is the martyr and the mother, the lion and the lamb, the fasting and the feasting, the ashes and the alleluias. It is the cross and the empty tomb. It is life loved so fiercely that death loses its throne. So, now, let's hear Chesterton say it in his own strange, brilliant thunderbolt way. Before we read, would you take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs stronger bones in a soft age? It literally costs you nothing. It helps this ministry, and it mildly irritates the algorithm, which is one of the few forms of spiritual warfare available from a recliner. Here is tonight's reading of Chapter 6 of Orthodoxy, 6H. I went over all the cases, and I found the key fitted so far. The fact that Swinburne was irritated at the unhappiness of Christians and yet more irritated at their happiness was easily explained. It was no longer a complication of diseases in Christianity, but a complication of diseases in Swinburne. The restraints of Christians saddened him simply because he was more hedonist than a healthy man should be. The faith of Christianity angered him because he was more pessimistic than a healthy man should be. In the same way, the Malthusians, by instinct, attacked Christianity, not because there is anything especially anti-Malthusian about Christianity, but because there is something a little anti-human about Malthusianism. Nevertheless, it could not, I felt, be quite true that Christianity was merely sensible and stood in the middle. There was really an element in it of emphasis and even frenzy which had justified the secularists in their superficial criticism. It might be wise, I began more and more to think that it was wise, but it was not merely worldly wise, it was not merely temperate and respectable. Its fierce crusaders and meek saints might balance each other, still the crusaders were very fierce and the saints were very meek. Meek beyond all decency. Now, it was just at this point of the speculation that I remembered my thoughts about the martyr and the suicide. In that matter, there had been this combination between two almost insane positions, which yet somehow amounted to sanity. This was just such another contradiction, and this I had already found to be true. This was exactly one of the paradoxes in which skeptics found the creed wrong, and in this I had found it right. Madly, as Christians might love the martyr or hate the suicide, they never felt these passions more madly than I had felt them long before I dreamed of Christianity. Then the most difficult and interesting part of the mental process opened, and I began to trace this idea darkly through all the enormous thoughts of our theology. The idea was that which I had outlined touching the optimist and the pessimist, that we want not an amalgam or compromise, but both things at the top of their energy, love and wrath, both burning. Here I shall only trace it in relation to ethics, but I need not remind the reader that the idea of this combination is indeed central in Orthodox theology. For Orthodox theology has specially insisted that Christ was not a being apart from God and man, like an elf, nor yet a being half human and half not, like a centaur, but both things at once, and both things thoroughly, very man and very God. Now, let me trace this notion as I found it. All sane men concede that sanity is some kind of equilibrium, that one may be mad and eat too much, or mad and eat too little. Some moderns have indeed appeared with vague versions of progress and evolution which seeks to destroy the meson, or balance of Aristotle. They seem to suggest that we are meant to starve progressively, or to go on eating larger and larger breakfasts every morning forever. But the great truism of the meson remains for all thinking men, and these people have not upset any balance except their own. But granted that, we have all to keep a balance. The real interest comes in with the question of how that balance can be kept. That was the problem which paganism tried to solve. That was the problem which I think Christianity solved. And solved in a very strange way. Paganism declared that virtue was in a balance. Christianity declared it was in a conflict. The collision of two passions apparently opposite. Of course, they were not really inconsistent, but they were such that it was hard to hold simultaneously. Let us follow for a moment the clue of the martyr and the suicide and take the case of courage. No quality has ever so much addled the brains and tangled the definitions of merely rational sages. Courage is almost a contradiction in terms. It means a strong desire to live, taking the form of a readiness to die. He that will lose his life, the same shall save it. Is not a piece of mysticism for saints and heroes. It is a piece of everyday advice for sailors or mountaineers. It might be printed in an alpine guide or a drill book. This paradox is the whole principle of courage, even of quite earthly and quite brutal courage. A man cut off by the sea may save his life if he will risk it on the precipice. He can only get away from death by continually stepping within an inch of it. A soldier surrounded by enemies, if he is to cut his way out, needs to combine a strong desire for living with a strange carelessness about dying. He must not merely cling to life, or then he will be a coward and will not escape. He must not merely wait for death, for then he will be a suicide and will not escape. He must seek his life in a spirit of furious indifference to it. He must desire life like water and yet drink death like wine. No philosopher, I fancy, has ever expressed this romantic riddle with adequate lucidity, but I certainly have not done so. But Christianity has done more. It has marked the limits of it in the awful graves of the suicide and the hero, showing the distance between him who dies for the sake of living and him who dies for the sake of dying. And it has held up ever since above the European lances the banner of the mystery of chivalry, the Christian courage, which is a disdain of death, not the Chinese courage, which is a disdain of life. That is the mystery of Christian courage, not the worship of death, not the terror of death, not the soft cowardice that says life must be preserved at the cost of truth, not the dark despair that says life is not worth preserving at all. Christian courage is a holy paradox. It loves life like water. It drinks death like wine when faithfulness demands it. That is why the martyrs were not suicides, and that is why the saints were not cowards. That's why Christ could go to the cross, not because death was beautiful, but because obedience was beautiful. And that is why we must become the kind of Christians who are too alive to fear death. Christ is King. Hail to the King.